relation gives us the ability to have these incredible innovations if we actually compress and converge so the new can emerge. So I believe what it means is that what remains for humans is the only space that humans are going to be able to do better than the machines, and that is relation. You might think of it's the heart. We went from the body economy to the mind economy to now the heart economy. And if we don't get really better at relation, well, machines don't have to be great at relation, but they'll be great at everything else. And if we're lousy at relation ourselves, we won't have a job. And at the top, people they spend most of their time on the relational work, not on the other stuff. So you see it happening already. That's all going to be accelerating. That's another reason why getting really focused on relation and figuring out, naming it, seeing it, figuring out how we can get better at it is actually sort of existentially important for us. Things can go way faster when we understand relation and you start thinking relationally and working that way relationally. It's a quantum jump. It's a relational leap beyond what we've been doing when we sort of just work on our ones and zeros, this person, that person, this person, that person. No, you focus on the relation between, that space on the org chart between, you manage to that. Yeah, what becomes possible is really stunning.
Hi, Zandy. When you think about the best teams you've been part of, what made them great? I mean, odds are it wasn't just the goals or the strategy or even the results. I mean, for me, it has so much to do with the people, what we did together, how we got along, how we interacted. And so here's the thing. We've spent decades as leaders focusing on how to manage individuals and processes and outcomes. But what if that mindset is missing the point? What if the future of leadership isn't about mastering tasks or motivating people, but about learning to truly see and grow in relation? Well, that's the provocative and inspiring idea at the heart of a new book entitled You and We, A Relational Rethinking of Work, Life, and Leadership by Jim Ferrell. Now, you may not know Jim's name, but if you're one of the millions of people who have read the book, Leadership and Self-Deception from the Arbinger Group, you've benefited from Jim's writing. In You and We, he takes a fresh step forward, telling a story that invites us to rethink identity, connection, and really leadership itself. In today's discussion, you'll hear why Jim believes we've been asking the wrong questions about what makes leaders and teams thrive. You'll learn about the 5 levels of relation, the laws that govern human connection, and so much more. This is a conversation I think it's going to stretch how you think about your role as a leader and how you show up in your most important relationships. I can't wait to share it with you. Hey, quick note. If you or someone you know is thinking about getting PMP certified, we put together a super helpful guide called The 5 Best Resources to Help You Pass the PMP on Your First Try. We've helped thousands of people earn their certification. We'd love to help you too. It's totally free, and it's a great way to get a head start. Just go to 5bestresources.peopleandprojectspodcast.com to grab your copy. Again, that's 5bestresources.peopleandprojectspodcast.com. Let's make this the year you get your PMP. Hey, well, let's jump into our discussion with Jim about his new book, You and We. Hey, Jim, thanks for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Really been looking forward to this. Yeah. So we'll get into lessons in the book in just a bit. But before we do, it's always fun to learn a little bit more about someone's backstory, Jim. And I'm wondering, was there anything from your family culture or maybe just early experiences growing up, stories that might just have planted some seeds for how you've come to think about leadership and human connection?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I would say yes, for sure. As I think back on my early years, I sort of had what I thought was an idyllic childhood. So really tight family. I actually have 6 sisters, 6 sisters and me.
Nice.
Mom and dad. And I always thought, wow. And then I would look around, I'd say, wait, why isn't it like that way everywhere for everyone? So there was a bit of this naivete, right? And the naivete actually hit close to home because I ended up discovering even within my own family, there were actually some real fissures that I was totally unaware of that sort of split apart in a number of ways as we got a little bit older. So that the reality of relationality and how it can be really good or it can sort of go in the opposite direction. I've lived them both. Now, professionally, what I found as I got older is in education, for example, I always, for some reason, I don't know if it was for those reasons or others, gravitated to writers and thinkers that were about how to stitch the human family together and what's going on there. So even in law school, I went to Yale Law School, and you have to write kind of a master's thesis level writing to graduate from there. And nothing was tickling my fancy. I wasn't getting really into anything until I got into the issue of how do we explain how in this country we've split apart? How do we get back together? So I actually wrote a law school thesis on how we're split apart and how we come back together. That's what I did, even in a place where you don't normally think that lawyers or law students are thinking about that issue. For me, it was always the core issue. And so ever since, it's what my life's been about, actually.
It's so cool. I think if I think back to my family culture, Jim, I think I would have said someone who's good at relation or relationships has to be extroverted. I think I would have said. And my dad wasn't a corporate executive. He was a bricklayer, introverted. But it's so interesting, Jim. Like, didn't matter where we went. He never met a stranger. Like, we'd be at a salad bar. He'd be striking up a conversation with somebody. He could talk to anybody, rich or poor, or regardless of their status. And he wouldn't want to be in front of a group. But learning of relation and relationship doesn't have to be extroversion. Right? I mean, perhaps that's
it doesn't. No, exactly right. Because, I mean, the difference. So for me, one of the ways to get to the core of it sounds like what your dad was about, and he was genius at, was whether we're in our heads when we're with people, or whether we're really with people. So I mean, because I can be like in the workplace, for example, I can be interacting with my boss, let's say. And I can be all in my head about my boss. They're not giving me recognition here. They shouldn't have done this. So we're in conversation and I'm sort of on guard and all of that. And I'm not actually in relation in that moment. I'm stuck in my head. And we do that all the time. I remember I grew up playing basketball and through college played basketball. And in basketball too, or any sport, you've got the game you're playing, but you can also be in your head while you're playing it. You can be worried about how many points you've scored, whether you're touching the ball enough, whether the crowd likes you. I mean, and when that's going on, you have two games happening. One's on the court, the other's in your head, and the one in your head always gets in the way of the real one.
For sure.
And it sounds like your dad wasn't that way when he was out sort of one-on-one with people. He was just with people. And he wasn't stuck in his head thinking about them or about himself. Yeah.
I don't think I recognized it as that, and I'm quite sure he did not recognize it.
Which is why, exactly. I'm sure he didn't.
I know, of course. Yeah, isn't that it? And you spend a lot of time on stages, as I do. Aren't we at our worst when we're worried about how do we look or focusing on ourselves as opposed to focusing on the group that we're working with and stuff like that? So it is.
It's exactly right.
This idea of in our head or present. I love that. When I first got the email from Catherine about a potential of this interview, all I saw was that you were the author of Leadership and Self-Deception. And that was I feel like a game-changing book for me when I was first exposed to it and reading it. And so I said yes to the interview just because of that, without realizing I'd fall in love with your new book. Okay. But
I see.
What I thought was interesting was that book, Leadership and Self-Deception, as well as Anatomy of Peace, they were published under the Arbinger Institute name as the author, not your name. And I just thought it might be interesting. Like, what was the reasoning behind that choice?
Yeah. A couple of things. By the way, Leadership and Self-Deception was the first book I ever wrote. I mean,
is that right? First one ever?
Yeah. I had been a lawyer, left law, and got into this whole leadership realm. And so we needed a book. So yeah, I'd written a lot as a lawyer, but boring stuff no one would want to read. Right? So I didn't know how it would go, but it just turns out that book really hit a chord and it's gone crazy ever since. So so there were a couple things at play in terms of authorship and what to say on the cover. One was that the founder of our company hadn't yet written his own book, and we were like, there's no way we're getting out in front of him. We just didn't feel like the right thing to do. So that was a constraint in a way, but the other thing was we just felt like for a number of different reasons, it would be better just to build the company brand rather than individuals. So that was really the thinking.
Just a hugely humble thing, I think, on your part, right? Because I think to the contrary, I think what a lot of people do is I've always wanted to see my name on a book, on a shelf, at a bookstore, and like as a life, tick that off. And so good for you for even being sensed that,
Well, it's interesting because in a way it freed me up because, when you do put your name on a book, the first question people have is, well, who's this person and what credential do they have? And, I was a lawyer and And I'm writing about the things I was writing about. I'm not sure being a lawyer at the time would have been the credential. People like, okay, we'll listen to this guy. But writing in the name of the organization, all of a sudden gave me all the credential. I could write about anything. So I started to write and write and write and write and write. And I'm not sure I ever would have written anything if I couldn't have first written just in the name of the company. Now, ever since, now I can. I mean, I've written a lot, and I know a few more things now. I've made more mistakes too. So this one, You and We, my new book's different. That is in my name. And I'm now, I have a different company I've founded as well, With Leadership. So this is really, You and We is the first publication coming out, really introducing to the world this entirely new body of work, which is really fascinating.
Yeah, and I can't wait to introduce people to that whole idea. Because I think most of the people listening to us, Jim, I mean, they would agree that everything in business comes down, or almost everything in business comes, and life for that matter, comes down to relationships.
Yeah.
But I feel like your book makes this striking distinction. You don't just talk about relationships, you talk about relation. Right. So I'd love to know your take on the difference, and why do you say that management of relation, not individuals, is the new paradigm? Okay, so first on the question of difference between relation and relationship. So relation is a bit like gravity. So gravity just is. I mean, there's this reality we all live within, gravity, that we're not thinking about it because we're always living within it. Well, in similar manner, we're actually living in this other reality too, which is that everything's in relation. There's not a single thing that isn't already in relation. There's nothing that stands on its own. Whether ourselves or anything else, everything's sort of intertwined, and we become in relation with each other. So that's just the reality. Now, relationship is then in the context of just that we're all in relation. We'll form some bonds between certain people and with different people, and those become our relationships. And I get into this in You and We as well, that we can begin to relate at different levels of relation, and all the way from, and I use mathematical sort of descriptors for those. And we can relate at a level that I call division, for example. And at the division level, and by the way, anyone listening, I invite you to think about just your workplace or your home life for that matter, and see where these different ways of relating have shown up before. So this division level, we're obstructing each other. We're making things harder for each other. We're getting in each other's way. The next level up from division is what I call subtraction, which is better than division. But here, so we're no longer obstructing each other, but we're resisting each other. So Andy, let's say you and I work together, and if we're in this sort of level of relation that I'm calling subtraction, you might say something, I won't listen, or I'll roll my eyes. Oh, there goes Andy again, or I'll just work around you. And anyone in a workplace knows the situation where we're working around certain people, where we're just sort of resistant to each other. The next level up is what I call addition, and at the addition level, we're thankfully not engaging in those other things. But what we're doing is we're just sort of focused on what we ourselves are doing. So I'm showing up, I'm doing my work. You, Andy, you're showing up, you're doing your work. We're sort of heads down in our own lane. And this is true at the individual level, also the group level. You might be leading the sales department. I might be leading marketing. And our marketing team might be just all focused on the marketing, and the sales might just be all focused on the sales. And this is the addition level of relation. Next level up is multiplication, where now we're focusing on our work, but we're now also doing our work in a collaborative way with others, with other individuals, with other departments, etc. And then the highest level is, and part 3 of the book is entirely about this higher level, because it's really a revelation when you see, oh my word, there is a higher level of relation even than that, because we're all chasing after multiplication. But it's a level that I call compounding, where really fundamentally the walls come down. And we have our respective roles, but there's this deep integration of what we're doing. It's that I've always cared, for example, about how successful I am, let's say, in my role at work. But when I get to the compounding level, I still am concerned about that. But I'm as concerned about your success in your role as I am my own. And there's this deep intertwining. So these are these 5 levels of relation, or what sometimes we call in corporate context levels of connectivity. That's a word that lands for people. They understand, connectivity. That's important to actually be at higher levels of connectivity. It doesn't sound as philosophical necessarily as relation. So we'll use the terms interchangeably, but so those are 5 levels we talk about. I think I actually like relation better than connectivity.
Do you? Okay.
I honestly do.
Very good.
I think like you said, like we know that there's a lot of silos. There's a lot of addition, which in some ways is just a bunch of ones out there, right? But can we go to multiplication? the compounding. Like I just think of teams that I've been on where over time it's like almost like we didn't need a boss. Like we were just, almost like not necessarily truly self-organizing or managing, but like there was just this, I guess maybe historically we've called it synergy, like across the team, something like that. But the paradigm I think has been, if you're a manager, you're managing individuals, right? You're like I'm having one-on-ones, and there's certainly a team aspect to it. But is there anything else about this idea of this is a paradigm? Because I think I took from your book, what was it? The management of the individual is dead. I mean, that paradigm, or it soon will be.
Or it's dying,
It's dying, right? It's dying. It's But this new paradigm, and why would you say it's so important?
Okay, so I'll give you a couple of reasons. One is that, first of all, relation is just a reality. So it's already driving what's happening in your organization, even if you don't know it.
Right. Just like gravity is driving us.
It's like gravity is. Yeah. The challenge is that we've not had a way to see that relational space. So if you think of an org chart, so you have your names in boxes on a wall, and then we sort of manage those names in those boxes. But if you think about it, the most important part of the chart, of any org chart, is actually all the space in between the names and boxes, because that's where everything's happening.
Right.
Nothing's happening alone in a box. It's all what's happening in that space, but we haven't been able to see the space. So one of the things that the book gets into, and what we do with the leadership, is we illuminate the space between us so you can see it.
Yeah.
Now, there's different ways we do that. We have a digital instrument we use that people take that illuminates that space. That's one way. Another way is just imagine. We just talked about these 5 levels of relation. Let's just think about just the two of us. Well, let's say we had a team of 6, but let's start with we're a 2-person team. You and I can talk about, well, what level of relation would we say we've been working at work? And we can think about it. It's actually, people usually settle on about the same level. We've probably been adding, or maybe we've been subtracting, or maybe we've been multiplying, or whatever it is. Well, we're each putting from our perspective, a value on that space between us. It's sort of characterizing it. But now let's say it's not just us. There's 5 or 6 of us. I've got the relationship with Mary. I've got the work relationship with John. I've got the work relationship with Tanya, et cetera, as do you.
Right.
And we can each say, okay, the Jim-Tanya work relationship, what level of relation has that been at? And we put numbers on those. It's actually interesting.
I bet.
Addition is 0, gets you 0. Subtraction gets you -1, and division gets you -2. Multiplication is +1, and compounding is +2. So anyway, you put values on these, and you can create what we actually call, and you'll see in the book how to do it, and you see it happening, a relational map. So you get a grid of the space on the team. Now, you can do that not just between team members. You can actually do it between teams and parts of the organization. You can have sales, marketing, engineering, R&D, ops, admin, all these things. You can have these categories, and then you can ask, okay, between finance and marketing, what level of relation are we working at, et cetera. And you can build out, as you see in You and We, how it happens, a relational map of the organization, which people have never seen that before. Now, once you see that, so when you asked about, so what does it mean to manage relation rather than just individuals? Well, now once you see that, it's sort of like, well, now look, sales and marketing, like we were talking about before, you guys are operating at a 0 level of relation. So the question is that good enough for the business?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Is it? I mean, strategically, is that good enough for us? And if the answer to that is no, then the question, so how are we going to raise that? Now, I get into the book how you raise it too, but the first question is to be able to see it first.
Yeah.
Then it's like, so how are we going to raise it? And now as a leader, you can actually be looking at the relational connections across your organization and saying, where are we at relationally? And you can work to raise those. So you're not just working with all these individuals sort of independently, because no one's independent anyway. That's just a fiction.
Right.
So now we're actually working in the reality of we're all in connection. The only question is what level, and we're going to raise that relational level field across the organization. And you can see it, you can track it, you can measure it. That's what I mean. At least that's part of what I mean by managing relation. Now, let me say one other thing about this, because there's another reason why this is critical, especially in this point in time. And it's that we're in the middle of a shift of eras. And we all know we are, because it's all attached to AI, but there's an aspect of this, I think, that people that we're not alive to. And it's this, it's a shift in the nature of human work this way. So early on through most of human history, we made money, we brought value with our bodies, with our physical labor, right? And so the people who were the strongest, could do the most physically, were valued the highest in a community. Well, machines with the Industrial Revolution ended up pushing human bodies out of the workplace more and more and more. And that created this space like, well, what's human work going to be now? Well, that was the creation of really the mind-based economy where, okay, machines are doing the hard labor, we're doing the thinking in our minds. The shift that's happening now is we're getting shifted out of the mind space by machines again through AI. And we have a similar question to, well, what does that mean for our future, the future of human work, just like it did in centuries past about when we lost the body work. So I believe what it means is that what remains for humans is the only space that humans are going to be able to do better than the machines. And that is relation. It's the you might think of it's the heart. We went from the body economy to the mind economy to now the heart economy. And if we don't get really better at relation, well, machines don't have to be great at relation, but they'll be great at everything else. And if we're lousy at relation ourselves, we won't have a job because it'll be those who can relate better. That's the uniquely human competitive advantage we bring to the marketplace. It's always been the case. If you ask, the more senior you go in organization, well, probably front lines too, people will tell you, it's all about the people work. And at the top, people will say they spend most of their time on the relational work, not on the other stuff. So you see it happening already. That's all going to be accelerating. That's another reason why getting really focused on relation and figuring out, naming it, seeing it, figuring out how we can get better at it is actually sort of existentially important for us.
And you give a language or vocabulary to understand it too. Like I think of like Tuckman's thing about teams go form, storm, norm, perform. Well, I might be storming with that person. I might be performing with that. Like so many of these models, I feel like oversimplified. This gives us a much better way to map it and to understand it, because you can't improve it until you understand it, right?
Exactly.
So,
that's right.
You give us a code for it. So, the book has told us a story, and you're a great storyteller. I don't want to give anything important away, but would you at least set the stage for people listening to us about how would you describe the story of You and We?
Yeah, so the story is really rich. This one, to me, of all the books I've written in this format as a story, it's my favorite. It's my favorite book, first of all, but it's also my favorite story. I'll give you a little bit of background, and they'll tell you why I set it up this way. So the book is set in D.C., okay? There are actually 14 characters in this book. There's 4 main ones, maybe 5 if you count it, but there's 14 total. And those 14 consist of 4 people from a tech company that's based in Alexandria, Virginia. 4 people from Congress, 2 senators, 2 members of the House, and 4 people from an energy regulator come together with someone who's leading a White House task force, because out of the White House they realize that actually a splintering of society is as important, that is as much of a risk to our organization as military risk might be as well. We've got to, for national security purposes, figure out how we can pull together. So that's why the White House is involved. Then there's an MIT physics professor that's in the mix as well. So that's quite the mix. And people gather, they don't really know who they're going to be gathering with. How they end up being gathered is itself pretty intriguing. And then what unfolds is really interesting over a 2-day period between these people in all these dimensions. Now, one of the reasons why I think past books I've done, like Leadership and Self-Deception and The Anatomy of Peace, have really been so successful is they all sort of jump the lane. Leadership and Self-Deception is a business book that jumps, and obviously you read it and go, this is as much about my personal life as it is about business. Sure. Anatomy of Peace is a conflict resolution book, but it jumps because it's much about business as it is about conflict as a topic and personal life. So this one too, I realized this, when you have this issue of relation and how we're in connection or whether we're not, and then the risks associated with not being, that applies as much to business as it does to personal life, as it does to societal life for that matter. And we're living in a point in time where at the community level, we have real challenges relationally from my point of view.
For sure.
And so I wanted to bring all of those elements to bear, and it's unfolding in a workplace context, but it also is spilling over, the insights are spilling over into all those other directions in ways that I think are fascinating, and they end up, they're illuminating, and they're actually hopeful, because you can see, oh my word, in situations where we've thought like this is a dead end. I mean, this is not going to end well. Actually, you can see there is another path. There's a way you can see forward, and you get traction. So this again is both, you might be feeling that way in a workplace, like, oh man, this place is a dead end. Well, no, actually there's a path forward here. It can be changed.
Yeah.
It just looks different from what you've thought of before. So that's why that's why I set the book up that way. And that's the backstory. That's not giving away. Once all the characters and the tension is set on the board, and you let it rip, it gets quite interesting what happens between them.
Yep. You can guess how a Mission Impossible episode is going to end at the last second before. This one will keep you going, and it's a good tension in it and great payoff at the end. It's good. I thought it was interesting. Early on in the book, you gave the characters a deceptively simple assignment. Think of two relationships, and if I remember, it's like one is like one of your best relationships and one of your worst relationships, and then for each relationship, 3 words that describe you in that relationship. I'm just curious because I'm sure this is an exercise you've done with other people before. So what kind of insights have you seen people uncover from just that exercise?
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, listeners can just do that themselves. I mean, I just invite anyone, just think. I mean, this is easy to think of a really great relationship, a really poor one right now. And you think about, describe yourself with 3 words that describe yourself in each relationship. And the initial big aha is, in fact, I've never encountered it different from this. It's that those lists of 3 words are always entirely different words. They're not the same words. They don't even cross over in one of them. They're totally different. Well, that raises the question, well, then which person are you? Are you the person in the good relationship, or are you the person in the bad relationship? Now, that's a fascinating question because on the one hand, we want to hold on to this idea that I'm Jim and I'm so-and-so, right? We have this feeling about who we are. But now we're confronted with a situation where we go, well, which of you is the real Jim? And the reality is, I'm both of those people. And in fact, my wife and I sort of have a funny thing going that I fly a lot, right? I'm on the plane a lot. And I'm like a different person at the airport than I am outside of the airport. So she actually has this name for me. It's called Airport Jim. There's Airport Jim. And there's Airplane Jim too, is a little bit different once I'm on the plane than when I'm waiting to board. And there's all these different Jims. So, and there's all these different Andys. And the reason why is that there is no independent Jim apart from relational context. It just isn't, because there is no space that is apart from relational context. And we show up, we're influenced by all our relations. We show up in different ways. We influence across those relations as well. And other people show up differently with us. So we are who we are in relation. So I'm both of those Jims. I'm the one, and I own both of those. And it's also the realization that, oh wait, I'm also not this hermetically sealed off thing that's unaffected by other people, etc. No, actually, we're influencing and being influenced all the time. We're kind of like bundles of relating to each other. We all shed off our influence as we're, I'll be a bit different after our call today, Andy, because we've spent this time together. For example, have those memories, whatever things have come out of that. And we sort of put our spin against, and all that spin's being put against, and we're becoming in the context of all that influence. And that's the truth of the matter. So that's one way, usually early on with people that'll illustrate that, hey, actually, who we are is who we are in relationship, and we can be different people. And we are.
I think my tendency by doing the exercise was to think on the best relationship, that's who I am. And on the worst relationship, that's who they are.
That's what they cost me to be. I'm fully responsible for the good Jim, and they're fully responsible for the bad Jim. That is so hilarious. That is exactly right. It's what we do. So but the relational truth's different than that.
Isn't it interesting how just a simple exercise like that just makes you think? In fact, I had to even think, what is one of my worst relationships? Because I'm not surrounded by a lot of bad relationships.
Well, that's good news. That's good.
It's denial.
What's that? That's bad news.
Exactly. But anyway, it's seriously how a simple exercise can kind of draw some of that out. The character named Dot in the book, which just really a remarkable person, really. But she says something she says, proximity is not closeness. And it's not even a major point maybe necessarily, but it stood out to me because it was certainly, she had a reason for saying that in the moment, but it got me thinking about how companies are navigating remote and hybrid work these days. Because proximity is not closeness. So how have you seen remote work affect not just collaboration, but also relation?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. It's a really important question. People are trying to figure this out, right?
Yeah.
So I actually think that that if we think of the issue as a question between remote or in person, we're actually we're missing the real point.
Right.
Because there's a way we can be remote even when we're in person. Okay, right? As we often are, because proximity is not closeness. So there's a really interesting body of work. I get into it a little bit in You and We. By a scholar named Pierre Teilhard Desjardins. And Desjardins was a paleontologist. He actually was interesting. He was a Catholic priest and a paleontologist. But on the paleontology is the study of fossils and evolution and all of that. And on that side of his work, he wrote a number of really important books. But one of the key things he discovered is that all development from inorganic matter all the way up through life and thought always happens in a 3-part pattern. And that is, the first is that you have different things that end up compressing against each other. He says if we lived in sort of infinite space instead of on an enclosed finite globe, then these different things could just be different and independent forever, and nothing new will develop, because the new only develops because different things press up against each other. You get compression.
Right.
And then now, when you get compression, that gives you the opportunity. It doesn't always happen this way. And it certainly doesn't happen this way between us human beings as well, but it can. We can open to each other in a way where we open ourselves to each other, and that's the stage he calls convergence. And then when you converge, once you've converged, now there's the emergence of something new. I'll give you an example of this.
Yeah.
So let's say that you're an oxygen atom. And let's say that I'm a hydrogen atom. And let's say I've got a buddy, someone else who's a second hydrogen atom. Well, so now the world needs hydrogen and needs oxygen. That's great. You can go ahead and be oxygen. That's marvelous. We can be hydrogen. That's fine too. But if we come together, these two hydrogen atoms come together with you, the one oxygen atom, and we compress first, then we converge. That is, we open ourselves to the possibility of relation here and then converge. What emerges is an entirely new thing, water. As an oxygen atom, you couldn't dream up water. I couldn't dream it up as hydrogen. It's like totally different in kind from what either of us is. But when we open ourselves to each other, it's like, boom, you have this emergence of the new. So now let's come back to your question about remote versus in person. The real question for me is not remote or in person. The real question is, do we get enough compression in this organization in a way that invites convergence so that we can get emergence of the new? Because if we don't, whether we're in person or remote, we'll just keep working sort of independently. Best we'll ever do is addition in terms of the level of relation. We'll just do our own things. You don't get any of this convergence, this conjoining, out of which all the new innovations come out of differences coming together, always. I mean, if I just bring just myself, I'm just limited to myself and my own thoughts, but mixed Andy into the stream, you have different perspectives, different abilities, all of a sudden those two flash together. And now all of a sudden the possibilities emerge of things that neither of us could imagine. And that's water. So what relation, we see it everywhere. Relation gives us the ability to have these incredible innovations if we actually compress and converge so the new can emerge. And that's what people who are working remotely or in person have to be asking. We have to work in such a way where we're bumping up, that we are getting the ability to be together, but not only that, because that can just be aggravating. Do that in a way where we open ourselves to each other. Then you get the possibility of the convergence and the emergence of the new, and then you get water. And that's what we want to do. You want to make water. Every workplace, we want to make water. In our communities, we want water. We just don't want this piece alone here and that piece over there and this. No, we want better than we currently have. And that's going to take the differences coming together.
It's so good. Just because you and your hydrogen buddy and I show up at the water cooler at the same time doesn't mean we turn into water, right? So
that's true.
Just showing up proximity-wise doesn't mean it's convergence. And
exactly.
So thinking of ways to try to foster that is really good. I think your book would incent people to kind of think that way. Yeah,
I hope so.
Yeah. I think one of the pivotal moments early in the book is when the character Ricardo, MIT guy, introduces what he calls the first law of relation, that everything we see is relation. And it seemed philosophical. I feel like I learned about physics in your book. How do you explain that law to leaders who are used to thinking in terms of maybe oxygen, or I'm sorry, hydrogen and oxygen, individuals and outcomes maybe rather than connections and intersections.
Well, this is why I mentioned earlier, although you preferred the word relation, I find a lot of times in business, the word connectivity works. And here, let me give you an example why. I want to go to sports for a moment first. You'll hear coaches, whether it's soccer, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, whatever, they'll come after a game after a big win and they'll be asked, so what was the difference for the team tonight? And you'll hear coaches often say, we had really great connectivity. And what that means is they were out there functioning as one. Right. They were no one was in their head thinking about their own agenda, doing their own thing here. They moved and morphed and changed and helped because they were so on the same wavelength. They just were operating organically as one. That's connectivity. That's what has to happen, really. That's what every leader, too, in business, when you put it that way, they realize, actually, we need high connectivity in the organization. And that makes sense. So that's how I explain it to people in a business context. Most simply is about, connectivity is what makes the big difference. Now, on the point of all you see is relation, you can see that fairly simply. In fact, in one of the dialogues in the book, I give this example. So let's say here I am, Andy, you and I here. This is the first time we've ever met. We're here in conversation. So I'm seeing you, albeit digital, Andy. I'm seeing you here, okay? Yeah. So I think I'm seeing Andy. But actually, that isn't quite right. Because what I'm missing is I'm the one who's seeing Andy. So I think there's Andy over there. He's all separate. He's separate from me. No, but in fact, since I'm the one who's seeing Andy, I'm actually seeing myself seeing Andy. What I'm seeing is actually the relational intersection between us, not you all by yourself. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it's not only that. It's that the Andy that I am seeing is an Andy who is actually in response to me. Yeah. So already, we're in a dialogue. What you're asking or what you're saying is in response and vice versa to me, to each other. So what I'm actually seeing and experiencing is relation. We just don't think about it that way. We keep faking ourselves into it because we see there's Andy over there in his body and here's Jim over here in mine. But what's actually happening is in the space between us. And we both own that. Yeah. We're both affecting that. And what's happening in the space between us ends up changing what's inside us as well. We become different in response because of how the interplay is between us.
As you're saying that, what came to mind is when I had started a new company, my counterpart on the other side of the business, someone told me, you got to watch out for her. All kinds of she'll backstab you and all this other stuff. Yeah. And I had not met her yet. And so I'm getting this picture of what this person's like. I have a different relation with her. And when I found out, she was a fine person, Jim. She just didn't suffer fools well. And so it's interesting how two people, so which one is the real her, right? The real her was in relation, and I guess I got to be careful that I don't let someone else's water influence my, it's not really the right metaphor, but we can be influenced by how other people's relation might impact how we have relations. Any thoughts on that?
It's so true. I had a similar situation when we moved out here. We're in DC, just north of the district into Maryland. And so we bought this home. It's just this lovely spot. And we were sort of warned about the neighbor. Same story. That neighbor. Well, we've come to love this neighbor. She's a single woman now. Her partner passed away recently. She's older. We are dear friends. We had her over to dinner last night. And it's actually interesting with You and We unfolds as a book the way it does because of her. This person I was warned about. Because one time she says, hey, have you been to this museum over in Potomac, Maryland called Glenstone Museum?
No way.
I said, I've never even heard about that. She says, you've got to go to this place. It's like a 300-acre property. It's beautiful. She's really into nature and whatnot. And it's a contemporary art museum. It's free. You have to register to go, but it's free, and it's really something. Yeah. So my wife and I went like a couple days. Well, I guess a week later we scheduled to go. And we went, and I walked into Glenstone Museum. All of a sudden, in this context of this place, all of a sudden things started to pop. Yeah. And it turns out that that's the place where most of this book happens. It happens in the property of Glenstone Museum. Yeah. Because they're very unique things that are there that all of a sudden that play so well into this whole idea. But it's not only that it plays well. It wasn't only like I had the idea and now I'm going to go find the place it's going to be. It's actually the place taught me. It's actually the way certain things are laid out there actually has an impact on the content of the book too. That's another way it's relational. And it all happened because of my neighbor who I wasn't supposed to like, who we ended up discovering is just an amazing person who also doesn't suffer fools like your situation. Although she happens to like me. I don't know why.
So there's always time.
Yeah, there's always time. Yeah, the story's never over.
But I love that. I love that story. I bet there's words on the entrance hall that maybe aren't exactly as the book, but it's pretty close
exactly.
to it.
Yeah. There's some words on the entrance hall that play like 3 or 4 times in the book. Yeah, it's a little bit different than in the book, but that's what inspired it. There's a particular room in the museum. There's something so exquisite about that room, and much of what happens, it happens in that room for a very specific reason. There's part of what happens on the ground. It's really something.
That's cool.
And
anyway. Thanks to that neighbor. Yeah, I love it.
That neighbor.
Yeah. And you talked about the levels of relation, the division, subtraction, addition, multiplication, and compounding, and how you can actually map those across people. Here's my thought. As I have to believe I am filled with bias. And I might think, I think we're at multiplication, or I think compounding. So any thoughts on how leaders can recognize like where they are and maybe their teams are operating at?
Well, yeah. So I mentioned there are a few different ways we measure the space between us, this relational space. And one is we have a digital way to do that. And in the book, I get into that because the characters experience this as well. That issue you're showing up will show up in the data. So sometimes, for example, this is fairly common. At a top level in an organization, they might be rating everything is happening somewhere between multiplication and compounding. And then further down in the organization, they're rating, no, we're actually a subtraction. So you see in the data these massive differences on the experience of a person inside that organization, which is incredibly illuminating.
Yeah.
And again, that instrument illuminates things. No one has this data. No one's thinking this way. They're not thinking to illuminate the relational space, this connectivity, and that's what this is doing. But also in the relational mapping we talked about, that comes out as well. Like some person might think I'm at a such and such level, and someone else will say, no, actually it feels at this sort of level, and it sets up a kind of a discussion at that point. Now, let me say one other thing here, because we haven't gotten into it yet, but it's actually where the book builds to is when you lay out relation, you make the case for relation, and obviously people go, oh my word, I had never seen it that way, but people don't fight it. They go, that's right. And then when you lay out the levels of relation, people go, oh yeah, I get that. I've seen that. I've lived that. But it's the highest level, compounding, which is really where the magic happens. It's like, well, what is that? How does that happen? And so the book has 4 parts. Part 1 is making the case for basically the laws of relation, how there's this relational reality we're all living in. Part 2 is then what does it mean to think relationally? How do you map relation? It gets into the levels of relation we've talked about, et cetera, and a number of other things. Then part 3 is, well, if you want to go to level 5, if we're really going to compound together, what is that? How does that look like? And the key for that, of all the keys I've ever found, the key for that is the work of this really fascinating thinker. His name is Martin Buber. And Buber was actually reading one of his pieces that really spurred this book originally. I'd long loved his work, but it turns out that I'd, for most of my life, misunderstood his work, and I didn't realize that until I was riding on a plane a number of years ago, and I packed a couple of his books to read because he's just such a fascinating thinker. And I'm halfway over the Atlantic. I'm flying to Europe. I'm halfway over the Atlantic. All of a sudden, I read a paragraph actually, and I realized that paragraph just undercut what I've been believing for the last 20 years about relation. And I've been teaching about relation.
And helping people with that teaching.
And helping people with it. So what I'd been helping people with was getting them up to the level of multiplication, but I had been blind to anything beyond. I didn't understand it. And it wasn't until I actually understood what he was saying that I all of a sudden understood, oh my word. I totally have been missing the biggest move of all, this move to compounding, this move to sort of becoming larger yourself, sort of beyond yourself. It's that. And so part 3 of the book is about that. And then part 4 is about how, with that understanding, you see this happening in the characters, how when we relationally connect at higher and higher levels, we start to leap. There's sort of leaps in who we become. And so that last section is called the Relational Leap, when all the parts come together. But it's that third part about how do we actually expand beyond ourselves? How do we actually compound with other people? That for me, I love everything in the book, but for me, it points to that. And it's just that for me, it totally changes the world to be able to see that. and to recognize it in myself when it's happened, when it hasn't happened, and have an understanding of now why it hasn't happened and what to do about it, that really gets me excited.
And as much as the book gets you excited and I want people to read it, I have to think what's really been amazing is working through with organizations and teams and people and seeing the life change, right? Which leads to the book. But I mean, that must just be so fulfilling for you, huh, Jim?
It's amazing. So my teammates and I, we'll leave our engagements with organizations. We'll just look at each other and say, that was unbelievable. What just happened? Because look, I've been working with companies for going on 30 years. So I've seen a lot. And I've worked with great bodies of work before. But when you start to take a relational view of things, the progress you can make and the speed at which you can make it is like nothing I've ever seen. And there's sort of an analogy. In fact, I mentioned this analogy in the book because one of those companies, which is a tech company that's represented in the book, their technology is around quantum computing. Well, quantum computing is a fascinating thing. It's coming. We're going to change from all the computers we've been using for all these last number of decades, and it's all going to end up morphing over to quantum computing. And the core difference and why quantum computers are so like unspeakably faster and more powerful than what we're currently using is they're built on the theory of relation rather than on the theory of just little bits of ones and zeros. Everything's ones and zeros. Everything that we're currently is ones and zeros. But quantum computing is about relational entanglement of realities. I mean, stuff that just blows your mind. But the net result of that is the computers that compute based on that are just massively more powerful. And that's what happens in our own lives too. Things can go way faster when we understand relation and you start thinking relationally and working that way relationally. It's a quantum jump. It's a relational leap beyond what we've been doing when we be sort of just working our ones and zeros, this person, that person, this person, that person. No, you focus on the relation between, that space on the org chart between, you manage to that. Yeah, what becomes possible is really stunning.
I heard a pastor once say, he goes, don't learn how to fight fair in a marriage. Transform the marriage. Right? And then you interact differently, right? And so I think there's so much about this that we're not putting rules around behavior. It's like, get to the core. It's like, there's so much more here for ourselves. And there's so much I'd love to talk with you about, Jim, but I'd love to end with this. I'd love for listeners to hear directly from you. Like, why do you want them to read this book?
Look, I think this understanding of reality is transformational. It is actually the big revelation in science the last 100 years by far is that everything is in relation, that nothing stands alone. That when we're measuring things in our scientific experiments, we're just measuring reality's sort of answer to our own questions. That we're in the middle of every experiment. We're not ever standing on the outside. Right. So that's true of all of us. So my hope is that understanding becomes a transformational understanding of reality. That then lay on top of that these tools to first be able to see, so what's happening in that relational space? And then the understanding of what to do if you want to raise those levels. Already in workplaces, because we do this at Withy Leadership with all of our clients, I see what happens in the organizational space when you do that. So I want that to continue. I also have this belief that that's an absolutely transformational idea in our communities, in our society. That it's a viewpoint that we've not explored yet because people haven't thought about it to do that and haven't had the tools to do it with. My hope is that actually what comes out of you and we is that this awareness, all of a sudden, we've been failing to ask a whole set of questions that are actually out there to ask. And the answers that'll come as a result of that together when we're in conversation with each other, that gets me most excited of all. So all the workplaces I work in are sort of these mini labs where I see, oh my word, it's unbelievable what happens. And that's just given me all the confidence that let's take on the biggest lab in the world. Let's take on the world and it'll happen there too. So anyway, that's what gets me jazzed. I hope it gets readers jazzed as well.
Super hopeful book and message. For those listening, we barely touched on the story. And the lessons from Jim's new book. If you'd like to go deeper and understand what does it mean to live or to lead in relation, get a copy of Jim's new book, You and We. I put links to the book and the book's website in the show notes for this cast. So, hey, Jim, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Pleasure, Andy. Thank you so much.
Well, special thanks to Jim for joining us here on episode 476 of the People and Projects podcast. certainly enjoyed that discussion. And I think you can tell just from that interaction. I mean, Jim's a super engaging guy. And I think what you'll find if you pick up a copy of the book, easy read because of the narrative format, but don't let the easy read kind of make you think that it's not going to stretch you. I mean, I think this is a book that will stretch how you think about interacting with your team and other stakeholders and even loved ones and friends outside of work. You know, if you get a copy of the book, I'd love to hear what you take away from it. You can reach me at show@peopleandprojectspodcast.com. And whether it's from the book or today's discussion, I'd love to hear what you take away from it. If you like more on this topic, I put links in the show notes to 3 episodes. First one is episode 185 with Mitch Warner. And Mitch is with the Arbinger Institute. They're the people that published the book Leadership and Self-Deception. And we talk about that book in episode 185. Now, interestingly, if you stay for the outtakes after I'm done here, you'll hear what Jim thinks about the latest update to that book from the Arbinger Institute. Check that out. Also, you can check out episode 356 with Eric Barker. He wrote a book called Plays Well with People. And it's an entertaining book, and it's all about why everything you know about relationships is mostly wrong. And he's just a great writer. I enjoy the interview. I think you're going to find it something that you'll really enjoy listening to and consider getting a copy of the book. And then episode 459 with Adrian Kelly. It's different from this book, but I think Adrian gives a fresh look at identity and how we look at success. And so that's a discussion I'd love for you to catch. You know, at the outset, I mentioned our resource, the 5 best resources to pass your PMP exam on the first try. If you know somebody who's looking to get PMP certified, definitely let them know. The link for that is 5bestresources.peopleandprojectspodcast.com. And it's in the show notes as well. Hey, could I ask you a favor? If you've not left a review of the People and Projects podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to this, we'd love if you take the time to do it. Helps get the word out. And if you haven't reached out via email lately, you can reach me at show@peopleandprojectspodcast.com. I love hearing from listeners. I hear from somebody almost every day. And if you haven't sent a message yet, I'd love to hear from you. Well, on behalf of me and my team, thank you so much for listening.